Welcome to Pachamama Sacred Paths podcast. This podcast was created with the purpose of informing and sharing ancient ancestral wisdom relating to shamanism and sacred plant medicines, as well as other modalities of spirituality. Our mission is to share a safe and reverent understanding for anyone who is interested in healing and growing through shamanism, sacred plant medicines, Hinduism, and silence. If you would like to experience firsthand the pragmatic transformation that shamanism has to offer, please visit our retreats page, pachamamasacredpaths.org, at estimo.org, or you can click on the link appearing on the screen or go to the comment section below.
Hello everyone, welcome to Pachamama Sacred Paths second podcast. My name is Andres Villa.
And I'm Sabrina.
And we want to welcome you to this introduction to a series that we're going to do for the next couple of weeks, maybe months. And we're going to be talking about sacred plant medicine. And so on this first episode of the series, we want to talk a little bit about, just in general, what are they? And some of the views, some of the perspectives. And so we want to explore a little bit of those understandings, right? Of that are available to us at all points. And the first one that I feel that is important that we understand is the a little bit more collective understanding, which is from the social and cultural paradigms. Mm-hmm. And I think we were spoken a little while ago about how sometimes we have some perspectives about what plant medicine is with the label of drugs, right? And I was sharing with you a while back that in my experience, my personal experience, when I was younger, my dad was very strict. My mom also, it was a cultural, total rejection to plant medicine, whether it was natural or chemical, right? Mm-hmm. There was some synthetic or it was pure from the earth. And so I remember experiencing this cultural understanding of what medicine was, specifically speaking about cannabis, for example, right? Which now we understand that Santa Maria is a teacher. It's a plant medicine that is a teacher. And my personal experience with Santa Maria was one of total fear in my home. Mm-hmm. I remember being sent to a rehab center for smoking pot. That's pretty weird nowadays, but it was back in the 90s, right? It was so common, to be super paranoid and afraid of this. And
that was your culture for your family down in Chihuahua, Mexico.
Chihuahua, Mexico, yeah.
And my family culture in Midwestern Minnesota was that it was wrong and, don't touch that stuff. Only criminals and, crazy people touch those plant medicines.
Yep. And I think maybe here similarly to Mexico, there was this war on drugs, right? Mm-hmm. All throughout the 80s and 90s. And after the whole era of the hippie transition, there was like frowned upon.
Yeah, those people don't want to work, and they're
lazy, reaching off the system,
right?
And so there's some truth to the fact that some synthetic drugs are pretty destructive to the physicality of a human being, but also they feel like they can be counterproductive to the evolution of consciousness. Mm-hmm. So, and here we're talking about, a little bit more abrasive, more harsh ones like meth or crack, heroin, of course. We all know all of the stories of what they can do. And, in the tradition there, even though everything is medicine, right? In the Shipibo tradition, there's tons of Icaros and songs and understandings and teachings that say that everything is medicine. Because everything is bringing up to you a certain aspect of you that you need, and that you either completely attach and identify with or reject, right? However, we don't see this as medicines because usually as a medicine is like you have a cough and you take something for the cough, right?
You treat the symptoms.
You treat the symptoms. So, but going back into the understandings of how do we answer this question? What is sacred plant medicine, right? So the social and cultural is all of the ideas of family, the rejection, the stern. You're doing something bad, something wrong,
and it's different. You're going down a path that we're not familiar with. And
outcast.
Yes.
Yeah. Open. And so that's the first one. The second one is also, it feels like it's the root of all of that, the misinformation. To be completely fair, though, the establishment and the political paradigm has informed for many purposes. But one of the reasons that we want to honor is for the protection. The father figure that is represented with a political paradigm. Of taking care of the citizenship and taking care of the well-being in whichever way was possible, right? So they block all of that, but at the same time, there's a lot of people like Terence McKenna. We're talking about how they have some very, very good points about how there's a control factor in prohibiting all of plant medicine, and it's due to the fact that this is something that you experience yourself.
Absolutely,
right?
Yeah.
It starts to awaken a sense of why, and why am I here? Why am I feeling like this?
Why am I eating guacamole on tortilla chips? You know what I mean? It's that question of why am I doing anything that I'm doing right now?
And then that question evolves into, why are you telling me that this is wrong?
Right.
Why are you telling me that this is good? Right? And so...
And do I believe that? You dive a little bit deeper, and the sacred medicine can take you into a place where you come to an acceptance of what you're agreeing to just by breathing.
You really become aware of how that feels, that agreement feels. And so you can... It's an awakening.
Right.
The sacred plant medicines, in our experience, do facilitate an awakening. But it's been demonized so much, right? It's been... because of that control, it's harder to keep everybody in a status quo, in a pretty level, same thinking, feeding the system, and being complacent with what is, however that is, rather than promoting in the population, promoting a sense of there's so much more that you can do. There's so much more potential that you can do. And
or even more simply, there's so much more that you are already. So much more that you are comprised of.
Yes, and I think from that is what stems of what is your potential as far as action, right?
Yep.
So, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. So there's the obviously that's the social agreements of what drugs are. And again, here we want to distinguish of what we're talking about in this podcast. What we're going to be talking about is natural, plant medicines from the perspective of nature. So the reason why everything has been considered a drug, things like ayahuasca, like peyote, is because they all have a similar effect on the mind, which is altered states of consciousness, right? And so the same way that, for example, marijuana or cannabis, it actually gives you a psychedelic experience. So that is the common ground for no. And so here comes peyote giving you a similar experience. And the natives use this for thousands of years, and here it comes within less than 50 years, and they said, like, no, bad, illegal. When there's so much to it, there's so much nature to it, and the same thing with ayahuasca, with really all of them, right?
Right.
There's been a few that are kind of like more commonly accepted, like mapacho, rapé, tabaco, right, and sananga, and cambo. Because they're even though they're medicines or physical medicines, they haven't really been proven to do any harm consciously or physically. So they're like, okay, you can have that, but
right.
But everything else is pretty much frowned upon because of that. And so we respect that, right? We respect the.
I think a large part of the sacred medicine portion is the like you said, Terence McKenna and some of the more recent folks who are advocating for additional or I should say less regulation and less restriction, less
right.
legal repercussions for engaging with these medicines. That what those sources talk about is this level of, depending on the source, this level of freedom or sovereignty that comes along with, having that realization. When you
that question that awakens.
Right. And I think there's a really high potential in many of these medicines, as we've seen. You mentioned heroin. There's potential in any medicine to overuse it. You actually see that in antibiotics, right? The overuse of antibiotics and how it loses its efficacy.
Yeah.
I think it's the same thing with the plant medicines, that you can have too much coffee, you can have too much alcohol, you can have too much Santa Maria, you can have where you're losing some of the benefit, and maybe not. Maybe you're connecting with it for a complete change of of your mind temporarily. Whereas if what we're talking about is, or what we dive deeper into is using the plant medicines to expand, to get.
And so here to me, I think that the recognition of what you're talking about is, how is it that it's not everything should be banned and blocked. It's understanding why and how is it that it has an effect on us.
Education and
education, 100% education. And so this is what we're doing here, right? Is we're just bringing some of the perspectives that are a little bit more natural, not so much to reject the existence of these natural things, these natural allies that are considered in the jungle and in the mountains of Peru and Colombia. They're not anything other than something that exists naturally and freely in nature. In the Quechua vocabulary, that is, all of this is part of causa, or existence, right? And existence, as we understand, that idea of God, that from the Big Bang everything was created, right? And so that existence is also in that primal impulse that created everything. It is very much aligned with nature. It's always in alignment, because nature doesn't create situations of harsh. It's just naturally flowing, right, with what is. And so we understand, if we understand that plants have also a function and a purpose, and have an identity, then we can start to have communion with the spiritual aspect of the plants, which is the spirit of Mother Ayahuasca, the spirit of Papa San Pedro, Papa Huachuma, and Hikuri, or Peyote, and all of the other ones, Sapito, Jurema, Mimosa. There's just it's abundant. It's so abundant, and what they offer in our experience, and what we understand, and that is the value for humanity, is that they allow us to experience our nature, our essence, which is natural, because it is from nature. They are from nature,
free from some of the blockages that we might have from different paradigms that we talked about earlier. The political or religious or upbringing, foundational community paradigms that actually convince us that our nature is potentially not okay.
Yeah, or not good.
Not good.
So it is through the reflection, through being able to experience this nature, then comes the contrast of so this doesn't really feel so good. My apprehension towards an aspect of myself. So there's a belief that I hold that there is something bad, and then we end up projecting these things, right? Like if we judge that jealousy or fear are bad in people, is mostly because I have negated those natural aspects within myself, and we can start to experience the nature that is actually not so much focused or inclined to believe that this is so. Right, it is a realization that actually it is completely free from any of that, and so that is one of the gifts and beauty of that. So, if you want, we can talk a little bit about the Quero, specifically.
Well, exactly that. Exactly where I was going, and you talk often about the having a right relationship or the right use of these different medicines.
Yeah.
In the Keto phrase, I believe, is Anya or Aini, that gives us that alignment or that balance and the value. And as we talk about potential for abuse and things like that, it's an exchange of Aini, right? You're making sure that you have a balance.
So the way that we experience Aini is, first and foremost, we want to be in connection, not in rejection of everything, not in rejection of that existence that, if you think about the written word in the Bible, everything comes, everything that is, God created absolutely everything, right? And, a missing point is that not only it created, but it is inherently in everything, right? So rejecting an aspect of existence, I'm actually rejecting an aspect of God, but more intricately is I'm rejecting an aspect of myself. In this case, what nature represents my own nature, right? So the first principle, which is kausai, it helps us to understand that everything that exists is part of nature. It's part of something, a natural creation, a natural design.
And in Hinduism, that's known as Brahman. Right. Brahman. So it's the same.
The whole thing.
An incredible connection. I think we talked a little bit about it in the last episode of the link between the Hinduism beliefs and the Keto as well. Right. But yes, the Kausai giving everything existence as we look in our definition of sacredness for these plants, it's respecting the energy and the life that they carry.
As we consider and understand the existence of everything, right? In this case, we're talking about plant medicine. Then we understand that everything that exists has a function and a purpose, a level of consciousness, a very specific vibration. And so the vibration, the purpose, and the function of plants, it is considered by all throughout the planet, indigenous cultures, of course, sacred.
Yep.
Sacred, and why? If we define sacred, then we first need to experience this, right? And here, talking about experience, we want to share with everyone and make sure that it's pretty clear that we're not advocating, we're not selling, we don't encourage anyone to take sacred medicines of any kind, because this is a just for the purpose of informing and bringing some perspectives about what this is and how is it that this can help. And after you are pretty informed, after you do your own research about what this is, then you can make a choice, make a decision whether this is for you or not. It is important, like Sabrina was saying, it might not be for you, and that is completely okay.
And I think there are a few medicines that we, when we talk about the sacredness, now you kind of listed them off before, and there are different levels of, depending on what country or what state or what region you're going to, they have different levels of whether or not they're legal,
right?
By the local politics. So it's to be mindful of that as you're listening to this and engaging. Potentially interested in engaging, do your research.
Yeah, I was watching a podcast some years ago with Brian from London Rio. The podcast London Rio is a video podcast, and so him and one of his guests, who's pretty well versed in sacred medicines in a reverent way, they take a flight. I don't know if they took a flight, to be completely honest, but that's the way they said. We got out of the illegality of it, and then they went to the jungle, and then they experienced, or they went to a country. They wouldn't disclose which country, but they apparently took a flight out of where they were, which I think they were recording in London, and then they just flew so that they could experience without that. I'm doing something wrong in the face of the loss of the land, right?
Well, and that's something to remember, that there are a lot of places in the world that there's a thorough understanding of the traditions and the benefits
and
honor and respect. So it really is going to depend on where you're traveling or where you are, to the level of its availability and the expertise that it's administered with.
Presented with. And so going back to the sacredness that is observed all throughout the cultures, sacred plant medicine is considered sacred because once we have that experience, talked about experience already, what is our position on experience, But once you go through the experience, then you can observe a very tangible and very clear um, benefit. That it's an emotional benefit, that is a security, self-assurance benefit. It helps you with, releasing negative emotion, healing trauma, healing even some physicality. We've had, in the circles that we've been a part of, we've had people healing from cancer tumors. I think we shared that a few times ago that there was a retreat of 4 days, Thursday to Sunday, and the lady that came to experience the retreat was scheduled the very next Tuesday to go into surgery for a removal of a cancerous tumor. And when she got on Tuesday, and on the retreat, we felt there was a lot of energy moving and some visualizations of what was happening. And when she got there on the Tuesday, there was nothing. And the doctor's like, what? She's like, did you go to? It's like, but there's no marks. How can what's going on? Like a confusion, right?
Right.
Because it's outside of the norm. And so,
in a lot of ways too, we talk about those maladies that we have, the spiritual maladies, as the collective. You might hear a lot of people lately refer to those as walls. I've built all these walls around me because of one event or one experience or another. And
yeah.
The sacred medicines have an incredible ability to help you if you want.
Yes.
To
you're
shed,
willing, you're ready
to shed those walls.
And here's important also to understand that even though that happened to her, she was ready for it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not this is not a fact that if you take sacred medicines you're going to heal from cancer or heal from any illness. It is not what we're saying. It's saying that it has the potential for it.
Mm-hmm.
It has the potential. And a lot of people, I don't know if I mentioned this, but one of the initiates from our lineage, from the Quero lineage, his name is Alberto Villolo. He's an anthropologist, I believe. And he's got some books, and we resonate with a lot of it. He's part of he actually studied with Sebastian and with Manuel Quispe back in those days when he was around. And but anyways, long story short, he experienced something that there was a parasite that was eating his brain, and he collapsed on stage. When presenting one of his books, and he shares this in his book. One of the books that I think is the Grow a New Body book.
Okay.
So I'm trying to make advertising for it. He's part of the lineage, so I feel comfortable talking about his experience, and it's the understanding that everything comes from within and everything is a lesson, and we cause everything, right? We're at the center. We're causing every single one of our experiences. And so he decided, he had two options. He had two tickets in his hand. He had a ticket to go to Miami to meet with the best of the best when it came to parasites and different diseases like that, or another one that was like, let's go to the jungle. Mm-hmm. And he decided, he ended up going to the jungle, and he's still alive and kicking. And so the benefit, right? The benefit of it is it comes, any benefit, spiritual, physical, emotional, mental, all of the benefits come from an alignment. Mm-hmm. An alignment. And so the sacred medicines, it doesn't really matter if it's ayahuasca, San Pedro, sapito. It is our experience that once we have a willingness to surrender to the medicine, and this is not submitting, right?
Right.
I'm not like, okay, I'm here, kick my ass, because that already implies a perspective that might not be very expanded or very helpful. Mm-hmm. It is I am here to experience whatever teaching I am to learn, mm-hmm. In a present way. So that's when really we can meet some of the energies that we hold subconsciously, unconsciously, that we have agreements from, sometimes lifetimes.
Right. I found one of the results of engaging with the sacred medicines is a natural, intuitive naturopathy. Uh-huh. That you sort of intuitively know. You start listening to your body, mm-hmm. and you start listening to your mind, and you start just, okay, I need to eat,
right.
differently than how I've been eating. Not that there's a right or wrong way to eat, mm-hmm. but that you start listening to your body, and your body's telling you what it needs. And or your mind is telling you what it needs, whether that's physical work or, like I said, it just kind of rounds out the whole naturopathy where you're not necessarily finding benefit in the head change because you're already getting it by naturally changing patterns in your life that feel better.
And it's being in alignment. It really doesn't mean that listening to our body, you're going to become like a super fit, Charles Atlas type of guy.
No, probably not.
You see people like Yogananda that all throughout they were heavy set, even though they were like highly spiritual and attentive to what is it that the body needs. So it's much more than what the conceived spiritual. We think of usually being enlightened. We think of Jesus, and he was like thin and good looking, and
So the pictures say. So the pictures portray. We don't really know.
Right.
We don't really know. I don't think anybody snapped it.
All of that. Merchandising, right? So these the benefit of this is, like we said, it poses an awakening to start really understanding ourselves a little bit better. What is it that I feel about myself and about the world? And all of that feeling is really my subconscious beliefs, right? It actually gets us very clear as to what are some of the things that I hold, that I identify with, and I hold that are creating conflict in my life. Some of these energies that we are identified with sometimes, we feel that it's okay to condemn, certain aspects of human behavior. And this is not to say that it's not important to discern when something is resonant or not, when something is harmonious or not. But to jump from recognizing that it's not harmonious to condemning, and we have so many times we have an agreement to condemnation, right? And we don't notice that we are condemning something that is part of the collective, something that we are a part of, and something that is a part of us.
And a great example is we were talking about as far as our parents, up in our upbringing, our parents' communication about what to think about plant medicines, certain plant medicines.
Yep.
And that is the collective influence on how we see things that are unfamiliar to us.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. And so the sacredness then starts to be observed. Once that's why we consider sacred plant medicine not a drug, is because we see the benefit of emotional maturity and physical health. When you're talking about kambo, for example. And even rapé, it poses all of the medicines because they're in nature, they're from nature. They pose some aspect of natural benefit to us, health benefit, that is.
Yes, and each experience, each medicine, and each person who's experiencing that medicine experiences something different and unique to them.
Right, depending according to what is it they're working with. But like, for example, for a long time, I had a really difficult experience with, for example, San Pedro or peyote. I would get really bloated. And it's like, this is actually making me like, until I had to really understand and work with what is it within me that it's reacting to that, right? And gradually it has actually been a process of like understanding what is needed and what is not needed from my diet, what you were saying, like listening to the body, right? And then what I started noticing is that it wasn't the peyote, it wasn't throughout the experience of peyote or San Pedro, I was just enjoying a shitload of guacamole, dude. It's like, this is so good. Life is great, And it is, it is beautiful. It's really beautiful to enjoy, but consciously, where am I? Where am I? So it does presents and offers a benefit and an awareness increase, right?
And I think so some of the medicines that we're talking about are pretty profound, have been in traditions for a really long time. Thousands of years on multiple continents in different forms. The Cepito or Bufo that we're going to talk about next week is pretty exciting.
Yeah.
You see that coming out in news, and it's just, it's known as so many things. I've heard it referred to as the God molecule, and even though it's an excretion from the Bufo alvarius frog, it comes from plants as well. The toad, right? It comes from plants as well, so it's in nature. And
abundantly.
And then you have the ayahuasca that is, has its own tradition. Ayahuascarians and the Kerdo tradition, so many down in South America. for thousands of years, protecting this sacred plant medicine.
Mm-hmm.
As well as the, San Pedro and Peyote that you mentioned, the Niños Santos we'll be talking about in future episodes. Like, there's so many beautiful, sacred, whole medicines, where the entire plant is part of that collective.
And I think to continue with what you were saying about Aini, right? Being in right relationship. It's okay, we understand the sacredness of it, right? But, culturally, collectively, and it's gradually changing, but what it has been a tendency of human nature, and this is like a collective ego that is really of a leeching type of nature, right? And we've talked about this, quite a bit, about how there's a tendency of the ego to default to three negative archetypes, which is the savior, the executioner, and the victim, right? And so when we have this victimhood perspective about our process of our evolution, then we need some saving. We need someone to come and save us, right? Whether it is a guru or whether it is a saint,
that or your college professor, or somebody,
or religion, or politics. I bow to the establishment of government because they will take care of me. They will save me. Or economics, I devote my life to making money so that I can be safe, right? And so we'll talk about those paradigms later in the podcast. But it is important to know that what happens is, then if I need some saving and I devote myself, especially with sacred plant medicine, we've had situations where there's participants that come and it's like, yeah, I've done medicine 350 times, right? And it's like, wow, like what do you have to do? Please enlighten us about something, right? And what we find, based on what they've shared, is that their life is actually filled with misery at a level way, way higher of where they've lost families, they've lost jobs, and they've lost income, and even sometimes health, because they were not in right relationship. And when I say it is important to define right relationship by understanding that there's not so much the focus of that there's something wrong that we're doing when we're meeting the medicines. It's about the lack of the balance that puts us in right relationship. So when it comes to Kausai, when it comes to understanding the existence of these plant medicines, we give existence just like, if everything has a function and a purpose that we mentioned, right? They have a vibration that we can communicate and relate to. And so as we are communicating with sacred plant medicine, in this case, for example, just to pick up one of them, if we're having communion with ayahuasca, and I start to have a relationship with ayahuasca, then I find that the sacredness comes from the spirit of, which we call Mother Ayahuasca. Which, it is important to note that all of medicines have a positive and a negative, not so much a positive and a negative effect, but a positive and a negative energy, which is they're both part of the same balance, right? Is the feminine and the masculine, right? And the feminine consider a negative polarity, not that it's bad, it's just a charge, right? And then the positive polarity, not that it's good, it's just a charge. And so the balance of it, and so everything in nature, I have both a masculine and a feminine, right? The two hemispheres, the thinking and the feeling, all of it. So we understand then that to be in right relationship with the spirit of Mother Ayahuasca, or Papa Wachuma, or Padre Sapo, any of them, then we want to be in right relationship, in balance. We want to be in balance, so that we are not leeching and we're not a parasitic nature of just like, I need to take more ayahuasca, I need to take, it's a very obsessive trait that sometimes happens with people. And so one of the teachings that we cultivate in the church is to understand the need, for being in right relationship, not only with ourselves, which is already there by the ego, giving us pleasure and comfort, but also to experience that same wanting to be okay with myself in relation to everything else, right?
Yep.
So we'll talk a little bit about how to be in Aini with every single one of the sacred medicines in sacred plant medicines, really. And then we'll talk. Which ones are we going to talk about?
So I'm pretty excited that we're gonna kick off the discussion with Bufo. That'll be first, and then we'll get into ayahuasca and all of the various. Well, at least that we know of. I think there's probably an endless list of the different recipes for ayahuasca brews. There's pharmahuasca that you hear about on if you get down into the Reddit chats. But the what we're probably going to talk about most is the traditional
natural
brews.
ones.
Yep,
Yeah,
the traditional brews down in the Andes in South America and Peru, where they've been brewing this ayahuasca beverage for thousands, like we said, thousands of years.
Yeah.
Lots of tradition and a lot of healing and sacredness that's honored in the ayahuasca brew.
Right.
And then I'm not sure if we've determined the order of all of them in the future, but there's lots of sacred medicines that we're going to go through.
Yeah,
the peyote.
For sure, the ones that we regard the most influential in coming into balance with those two energies, which are all of them can be like when you go to the jungle, you can diet with bovine sana, right? Which is primarily feminine energy, and it's a heart opening. So, and we'll talk a little bit about the brews that we have been exposed to, and then also some of the major plant medicine that has helped so much in our own path, but also with the communities, right? Like we're gonna talk for sure. We're gonna talk about San Pedro, Peyote, and Niño Santos.
Yep.
We're going to talk about, obviously, Mother Ayahuasca.
Madre. The one of the surprising ones for me is Kambo, right? Such a powerful medicine. And Sananga as well, an incredible medicine, and then Mapacho and Mambe.
Mapachito.
Yeah,
Mambe.
Yep, the classic, underappreciated and potentially abused, some of those sacred medicines.
It's interesting to recognize we consider them sacred because of the spirituality of it, and really, if you look into Hinduism, everything is sacred, right? Even fear is sacred. So when it comes to tradition, the two that are considered sacred to the Q'ero. And this is a little bit more traditional, right? It has been Mapacho, or they call that's the masculine. The feminine of tobacco, of the Nicotina rustica, is called Sairi Mama. And so we'll talk a little bit about a little bit more in depth about them, and then also Mama Coca,
which is definitely one of those plants that has been. Very underappreciated, out of balance in certain people's lives,
and that's the reason why they consider it sacred, because in existence we have this polarity of masculine and feminine, but also everything that creates some polarity and some contrast, it is considered expansive in both directions. It expands, and so in the function of addressing human consciousness and just human life, for example, you think about tobacco. It has been abused. It has been used as a means to satisfy some needs, some craving. And I just smoke to de-stress, and so rather than dealing with, so it's a sense of separation from myself, in the sense of being abused, right? And then also it has been used for the same purpose of getting connected to myself, connecting to, and connecting to life. Using the smoke as a medium for prayer,
and offering blessing.
Right, it's something that is actually constructive in the sense of awareness. And then when it comes to coca, well, cocaine, has been, first and foremost, you can immediately see that it's been sort of like chemically altered and just used for a purpose of just like stimulation, some craving for some
empowerment
and rush, being rushed. And there's so many things, right? We're really not going to talk too much about that, but the reason we bring it up is because in the context of contrast that it creates in relationship to human consciousness, those two are considered the highest in regard in relationship to sacredness, right? So we're gonna explore a little bit about those two as well from the natural approach, right? Regardless of what some of the paradigms and society thinks, we're exploring from the traditional aspect of the Quero, understanding some of the perspectives, of course, not really bending down to tradition either, more of a personal relationship with some of these natural sacred plants that is available to everyone. That I cannot claim, even if I am a Native American, I can't claim, a monopoly on peyote or something like this, right? It is from nature to us, and to us that we are part of nature. So we'll explore everything with that freedom.
Yes.
And so I think. Do you have anything else that you want to comment?
No, I think the plan we're going to dive deep into each one of those medicines, starting with Sapito or Bufo, and then we'll go through different episodes. Ayahuasca might take a couple episodes. That's a big one.
For sure.
But no, we're going to dive deep into those medicines and get to understand them a little bit more and their history and their usage and how they're being used today, and maybe even some of the legal standpoints that they're on today, just to discuss those. So it'll be a good few weeks coming up, and hopefully, you guys can all join us for all those upcoming episodes. And if you can't, I'm sure you'll be able to access them on our website, adacemo.org, adacemo.org, and look forward to hanging out with you guys.
Thank you, guys.
Thank
Have
you.
a good one. See you next time.